Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Media Monitor on the SABC News Channel, independent and impartial. This, of course, is where we give you an update on what's been happening in the world of news and media and what's been going on behind the scenes. I'm Peter Ndoro. Now, this is what's coming up on the show. We probe the media coverage of two political heavyweights, the Zuma judgment and the C17 Banks Statements, CR17 Banks Statements. We'll be heading to the Kingdom of Eswatini, where the civil revolts that erupted this week as citizens demanded reform to its system of absolute monarchy. We also chat to the host of podcast and Chill with Mac G, who recently reached 200,000 subscribers on YouTube. But before we get into our highlighted stories, let's take a look at the stories of the day. And we start with the Sunday Times. Leading headline reads, "No, I won't go." This after the former president, Jacob Zuma, is reported to have told his supporters that gathered outside his Nkandla home that he will not hand himself over to begin his 15-month sentence, which was handed down by the Constitutional Court earlier this week. The Sunday Independent is running a story about the last-minute Constitutional Court decision to postpone former President Jacob Zuma's incarceration, and how it may have averted a bloodbath as thousands of his supporters, some armed with machine guns, had created a wall around his Nkandla homestead and vowed not to let any law enforcement officers arrest him. The Weekend Argus headline reads, "Zuma evades justice for now." And the Sunday Tribune is also leading with Jacob Zuma's imprisonment delay and how the former president, who was expected to report to the Westville prison today to begin serving a 15-month sentence. Excuse me. The Sunday World has also the former president splashed on its front page with a headline that reads, "Inside Plan to Arrest Zuma." Now, this past week, South African politics was rocked by two monumental Constitutional Court judgments, one being the unprecedented judgment which found former President Jacob Zuma guilty of contempt of court and sentenced him to 15 months in prison. The other one seeing the public protector, Busisiwe Mkhwebane, suffering yet another blow after the Constitutional Court dismissed her appeal against the High Court judgment rejecting her report on President Cyril Ramphosa's statement to Parliament about a donation made to his 2017 ANC presidential campaign. Well, we now ask how the media has covered these two rulings. For more on this, I'm pleased to be joined by the spokesperson of the Jacob Zuma Foundation, Mzwanele Manyi, and also Mavuso Msimang, ANC Veteran and Chair for Corruption Watch. Gentlemen, to both of you, a very good morning. Thanks so much indeed for joining us and welcome to the program.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting us.
Great. Let me start with you, Mr. Manyi. Your thoughts in terms of the coverage the media has had this past week. Let's start with the former president.
Peter, are you there?
Yes. Yeah, we're waiting for you. Yeah.
So what do you want to know?
So I want to know what your thoughts are. We're talking about how the media covered these two important court decisions, and we'll start with the one in the Constitutional Court. Your thoughts about how the media covered this?
Yeah. Look, I think the media continues to do a disservice in terms of covering the side of President Zuma. He is always characterized as this person that is incorrigible. He's always characterized as this person that is above the law. He is always characterized as this unreasonable person that does not want to conform to the rules of the country. I think that is the issue. This is the reason why I'm actually been brought in to try and assist President Zuma in making sure that his side of the story is heard. I mean, right now, everybody is laboring under the impression that President Zuma does not want to go to the commission, as it were, when in fact President Zuma all he really ever wanted was a neutral chairperson. That's all he ever wanted, as it were. And then even with this contempt of court debacle, I mean, all that really President Zuma had said is that, but I've got a recusal application pending in the High Court. Can you deal with that? I mean, what is the point of getting a higher court to get involved in a matter which is still pending on another court? So in other words, by the time the recusal application is successful, it just becomes an academic and useless exercise because you would have incarcerated a man. The fact that we have a situation where we've got apartheid-like situation. In apartheid, there was a phrase called detention without trial. Here, we go further because sometimes detention could mean being just kept in custody. Here we've got worse. We've got incarceration without trial. That is the worst form of travesty of justice. And the media is not characterizing the travesty of justice that is here. All they say is that Zuma got what it deserves. So it continues to be an unfair coverage. It continues to be a coverage that seeks to vilify the man. So indeed, it's been there, but it's been a coverage that seeks to vilify him.
All right. So according to you, a former president's done nothing wrong. We'll unpack all of that just now. Let me just get some thoughts from Mr. Msimang. Your thoughts about the judgment of the Constitutional Court?
Well, thank you very much, Peter. Before the judgment was announced, I and other people I work with, the veterans of the African National Congress, and also a group called Defend Our Democracy, made an official statement that we were going to accept the findings of the court, whatever they were. If they decided to acquit him, that's what we're going to stand by. So the court unanimously decided that ex-President Zuma was in contempt of court. We accept that completely. And we think that this is what everybody has to accept. The difference, just to stress the point, has been in the sentencing. 2 of the 9 judges believed that he should not be given a custodial sentence. The majority, 7, thought he should. And so this is how the Constitutional Court functions, and we accept, as we said, their decision.
What about the media, though? What did the media tell the story as you've told it, do you think?
I don't have any difficulty, to be honest with you, with the media. What Mr. Manyi reports is what they believe to be irregularities in the court system, in the justice system. But I think all of that has been faithfully reported by the media. They may make comments about him refusing to go to the Zondo Commission. Well, that is a fact. Mr. Manyi says all he ever required or expected was that he should have a neutral person to listen to his case. Well, that would be according him special treatment. The system in South Africa is that sometimes, and it happens a lot of the time, when an accused person feels that they're not comfortable with the judge listening to their case, they have requested that they recuse themselves. In some instances, they have. In others, they haven't. But the law gives them the right to make such a decision, and the law expects that the person who is accused respects that decision.
All right. Mr. Manyi, has the media been factually incorrect, or is it a question of an angle that they choose?
I think it becomes factually incorrect because, you see, when we talk about rule of law, you talk about justice, we talk about fairness, we talk about the law being the supreme, not the emotions or egos of people. In a situation of a recusal case, the most basic thing that the test that must be passed is just the apprehension of bias. Now, if you have an apprehension of bias of the chairperson, it's law to say that person should not chair. This is being a lawful situation. Now, it's even worse if the apprehension of bias is directed to a person who has deposed his own affidavit in terms of tabling his own version of the events that President Zuma is alluding to. Now, what you have here, you've got two affidavits on the table, the one of DCJ Zondo and the one of President Zuma. This is more than your normal apprehension of bias case. This is a direct conflict of interest issue, which has got two affidavits on the table. And then DCJ is on to decide.
But Mr. Manyi, the fact... Okay, but the fact... We're talking about facts, though. Yeah?
I beg your pardon?
We're talking about facts, though, and I'm just saying...
Yeah, this is a fact. This is a fact. What I'm saying to you, it's fact that DCJ is on to put his affidavit version on the table to say that they've got no relationship issues. This is fact. So it is fact that he had two affidavits. It is fact that DCJ is only decided that his affidavit must win the day. This is fact that we're dealing with here. Now, that's why President Zuma then decided that maybe he must go to court to have this matter resolved there. Now, and the reason you are becoming impatient with me is because this is the kind of stuff that media does not report. People of South Africa do not know that we've got two affidavits on the table. Media does not report this. This is the biasness that I'm dealing with.
All right.
Now, when every time that a person has to articulate President Zuma's point, then media always has a problem of time, no, that's not what we're dealing with now, and all kinds of funny excuses just to make sure that the version of President Zuma is never heard. That's a problem that we've been facing in this country.
The Constitutional Court, in its judgment, said that President Zuma did not cooperate. So you're saying that the Constitutional Court is wrong? There's also a question of affidavits that President Zuma was supposed to have filed against affidavits put forward by other witnesses. He didn't do any of that. So that might point to what the Constitutional Court found, that he didn't cooperate with the Commission. And that was long before he decided that he didn't want the Deputy Chief Justice sitting on the chair of the Commission.
I think let's be clear that in the first instance, the Constitutional Court had no business entertaining this case in the first place. Section 167 of the Constitution is very clear about what are the issues that the Constitutional Court should busy itself with. It's issues that are constitutional in nature and so on, not an issue that is a civil stroke criminal issue that DCJ Zondo should have taken to the NPA. That's why this thing happened in the first place. Now, what we have here, we have a situation where the highest court in the land allowed itself to be a court of first instance. This is a problem. Now, having been a court of first instance, and yet you know that you are the highest court in the land, and then in the process of doing that, you then, because of that, then the person loses his rights of appeal, because now you are the last court in the land. Why did the Constitutional Court do this in the first place? And then they go further. They then say, no, this case is extraordinary, and therefore normal procedures won't apply. So in other words, processes that have been stress tested to be fair, to be transparent, to be honest, are put aside. And then something else is put in to judge President Zuma.
So as far as you're concerned, the Constitutional Court erred and the media hasn't reported that properly. That's if I'm getting you correctly. All right, we'll come back to you now. Mr. Msimang, your thoughts, because we're going to move on to the CR17 bank statements just now, but your final thoughts. You've heard Mr. Manyi. I mean, the court system works the way that it does, and I suppose it's up to the MPs to change the constitution, to change the rules, if people like former President Zuma are unhappy.
I couldn't put it better than you have. Truth to tell, I'm not familiar with the nooks and crannies that Mr. Manyi is describing, and I really don't even want to enter that kind of space. I do find it extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary, that all the justices thought it was within their remits to deal with this case, and they took it up. And I don't think it's the media, really. A lot of legal opinion is of the view that the Constitutional Court had a right to deal with this. But that's really not for me to say. Having received the case, having entertained it, the court then came to the decision that it did. And we respect that decision.
All right, still with you, the CR17 Banks Statements. Do you think that the media was fair in its coverage and that citizens understand what the statements are about and what the court decided against the public protector?
Well, I'm not a media specialist, to be honest with you. And lately I have been very busy writing certain other things, and I haven't followed the media coverage as much as that. But suffice to say that I thought this was given sufficient, or at least a lot of airing. The issues were canvassed. I think it's a question of whether you accept the verdict of the court or not. I personally think the media did cover this, as I say, within the limits of my observance, of my monitoring of media activities. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So, Mr. Manyi, do you think that there's a difference in the way that President Ramaphosa and President Zuma are reported in the media?
Oh, yeah, very definitely different. President Ramaphosa, media goes out of its way to position him as an innocent person and all of that. I mean, if you look at these CR17 statements, for instance, as an example, I don't know how the lawyers argued the case in court, but the facts of the matter are this, that President Ramaphosa himself admitted to having given 2 EFF members money from the CR17 campaign funds. Court, however, has found that President Ramaphosa knows nothing about the CR17 funds. Court finds that he was not involved in the CR17 funds, yet the man is on record having dipped into the CR17 funds to give the 2 EFF members money, as it were. So for us that are looking from outside in, we're saying, what kind of justice system is this? Did the lawyers maybe not make this clear that President Ramaphosa admitted to dipping into these funds to give to the EFF members and many other people, I suppose, as it were. But now he is being characterized as a clean man, as if he didn't know about this. He is on record saying he has attended dinners for CR17 campaigns and all of this, and he knows that out of those dinners, monies are going to go into that fund. And all of a sudden, the man is positioned as if he had nothing to do with it, he has no clue. Public protector is on record saying there are emails from President Ramaphosa that talk about these funds, that talk about monies that go into this. And somehow the court has missed all this detail, and they focus on the technicalities which they point out that are incorrect in the submissions
but
of
the media surely reports what the judges say.
But the issue is that the media has, the reason I know this is not because I spend time with a public protector or anybody, it's because I've read source documents. Media does not read source documents, and if it does, it cherry picks. I have no information other than information from the source document. So the media of this country, what they must learn is to go to source document and report things fairly, objectively, and in a balanced manner, and not cherry pick the comments made in various forums must go to source documents. What I know is based on original sources. This is what media should do. And they must do it objectively and fairly and in a balanced manner. That's what must happen. They must not cherry pick to push a particular narrative.
All right. Mr. Msimang, do you think that President Ramaphosa gets unfairly positive media treatment versus, according to Mr. Manyi, negative characterization by former President Zuma?
You know, you're casting me in a very, very difficult role here of being a critic of the media in their minutiae. The thing is, Mr. Manyi is representing the foundation, has been taking a very particular interest in how you guys in the media report. My impression really was that you have a President Zuma who has a very difficult case anyway, and was consistently put himself in a manner where people would be probing, asking questions, and reporting. Well, the president says, what I remember of him was that he said as soon as he discovered that his son, for instance, was implicated in, contributed these funds, he himself went back to Parliament to report that, and the media reported that thing. But you know, on these issues, I think you are asking about media coverage, and I really must confess, I must disappoint you. I'm not an expert on that. What I really have seen is that there is always such a bias. If there's been any shortcoming, now, if you were to put the other side of the story, is that very little has been said on this funding about the millions, absolutely millions of monies that were paid to the competitors of Cyril Ramaphosa for the presidency of the ANC. The first thing that really astounds me is that so much money should be paid for anybody to become president. But yes, everyone who tried to be a president of the ANC during the last campaign received lots of money. Maybe the president got more, but it's only in the degree of what was received. I don't see much of that being reported in the media. So maybe Cyril Ramaphosa would take the view that you're busy talking about what's been exposed by the public protector, but you're not reporting on factually what has been happening in this campaign, because in the end, it's a question of whether this was conducted fairly or unfairly.
All right. Thank you very, very much, gentlemen. Mr. Manyi, I know you're going to hate me saying this, but we've run out of time. So sorry. Thank you so much to both of you. Mzwanele Manyi from the Jacob Zuma Foundation and ANC Veteran and Chair for Corruption Watch, Mavuso and Msimang. Gentlemen, thanks very much indeed for your time. All right. Well, you are citizens. You're the ones who decide at the end of the day whether we're doing a fair job in terms of reporting. And you've heard some thoughts from two people, citizens, with their own thoughts, perhaps slightly different. But you at home are the ones that make up your mind whether the media is being fair or not. We'll have more, and we cross the border this time, right after this, into Eswatini. Welcome back. You're still watching Media Monitor on the SABC News Channel. The Kingdom of Eswatini has been engulfed in violent protests calling for a democratic dispensation in the country. The protest started peacefully on June the 20th when the youth took to the streets in a push for the right to choose a Prime Minister democratically, as opposed to the Prime Minister being appointed by the King. However, the protests turned violent on June the 28th when buildings were torched and shops believed to be owned by King Mswati III were looted in Matsapa. According to reports, protesters also forced the Times of Swaziland newspaper to shut down, accusing it of being pro-government in its reporting. But the question we're trying to explore is how the media has been covering the story or how it's been allowed to cover the story. And helping us to unpack that is the editor of the Swaziland News, Zweli, Martin Dlamini. Zweli, thanks very much indeed for joining us and welcome to the program.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Peter, for having me.
All right. According to the World's Press Freedom Index, Eswatini doesn't do very well in terms of freedom of the press and freedom of the media. Is that something that you've experienced in the years that you've worked as a journalist?
Yes, of course, Peter. Eswatini does not respect media freedom. Even now, in the midst of the civil unrest, we have seen journalists being persecuted. In fact, the government wants the stories to be told the way they want. They don't want the stories to be told as they are. So that's where the problem arises, because they always want to mislead the world regarding the real situation on the ground.
Are you saying then that the state media, the broadcaster, radio, and the newspapers are not telling the story correctly as it's playing out?
Of course, Peter, it's even exaggerating to say they are not telling the story as it is. In fact, at some point, they wouldn't tell the story. You will find that Eswatini is experiencing protests and people are being killed. But when you open the TV, Eswatini TV, you will find that they are discussing business, maybe they are playing soapies. Nothing is being told about the situation on the ground. And this thing has been going on for some years, whereby the state media will portray that Eswatini is peaceful, Eswatini, everything is going well, when in fact people are losing their lives at the hands of the state, particularly the army and the police.
Do you think that independent media is fair as well? Because they could also be seen to be part of the activism, part of being opposed to this absolute monarchy, when maybe there are some Eswatini people who love the king and want things to stay as they are?
The role of the media, Peter, is to tell the story as it is. We expect the media to be independent, even if it's a state media. We expect the story to be told as it is. But when you look at the front page of the Times of Eswatini today, you can see that somehow the media has been completely captured, because the front page is suggesting that the army is declaring that they have taken over the state. When you look at that front page and the story, then you can see that actually Eswatini is under siege. But then when you read government statements, acting Prime Minister is denying that Eswatini is now under martial law, everything is okay, it's just confirming looting and damaging of properties by the protesters. So you understand that almost every time the government wants to mislead the world, they want to control the media so that the voices of the people could be suppressed. And then you can't expect the media to be the voice of the government, even though we expect the media to be independent and give government the right to respond every time we publish stories. But the fundamental role of the media is to be the voice of the people.
So let's look at it from the perspective of citizens then. They pick up a state newspaper and they'll hear great things about the king. You pick up an independent newspaper and you won't hear so much great news about the king. What is the citizen supposed to believe between these two points of view?
Citizens, they believe the truth, because when you tell a story, now in the world whereby we have the social media, we have online media, when you tell a story that something is happening maybe at Gaza, the people will just tell you if you are lying, because they are on the ground. They know what is happening in their respective places. So when you tell a story that this and this is happening in Swaziland, in Manyi, in Babane, the people will just tell you point blank, no, you are lying. This thing has never happened. So now the state media is facing...
Hello, Zweli?
Are you there?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Can I continue?
Yes, please.
Yes, I was saying, now in a world whereby we have the online media, the social media, it's very, very difficult for the state media to lie to the people, because we are reporting for people who know what is happening on the ground. So your question, whereby you're asking that, what are the people supposed to believe? People, they believe the truth. If you report the truth, you will have many followers, because people want the truth now. They have realized that most of the time the state media, especially in Swaziland, they lie to them such that they have been suppressed for years through propaganda and misleading information.
All right, so one of the key moments in this story this past week is, where is the king? And independent media were suggesting that they have reports that he has disappeared, he's left the country, and there were even reports saying he was in different countries at the same time, whereas of course the state was saying, no, he's here and he's helping government to deal with the issues. We still haven't heard from the king. How does one tell this story? Do we know whether he's in the country? Do we know if he's left the country? Because again, if we look at two different sources of media, you'll get two different answers.
Yeah, of course, Peter. It goes back to what I've been suggesting, that if you say the king is in the country, in the midst of this social and political unrest, one will expect that you must substantiate that by then maybe urging the king to address the nation. If the independent media is reporting that the king has fled the country, and we are disputing that as government or as the state media, your role in this regard is to just then prove to the people that the independent media is not telling the truth. Here is the king. Under the current situation, you cannot just say the king is in the country when in fact the people are expecting the king to address the nation and maybe give direction on what should be done in the midst of this civil unrest. So that's where the whole thing erupts, whereby you find that people are now starting not to believe what the government is saying, because government will just issue a statement and then give it to the state media to mislead the people. If the king is in Eswatini, one would expect that he should address the nation and give direction.
So, I spoke to the president of the opposition party, Podemo, this past week, and he said that he visited a hospital where he saw 16 people who had had some form of limb amputation because they'd been shot by the authorities. Now, if this is what's happening, there's a tragedy unfolding in Eswatini. Do you think that the media has done a fair job generally in telling this story? Because in America we had George Floyd, and that created international sensation in terms of media, but this seems to be happening every single day in numbers in Eswatini.
Peter, can you? There's a disturbing sound on your background, such that I can hardly hear you. Can you please repeat your question, please?
All right. I was just saying that, do you think that the media has told the story of Eswatini enough? Because if reports are to be believed about the number of people being killed by police, this should be a global outrage.
Peter, I don't believe we have done enough, because with the government shutting down the internet, it's possible that there are people who were killed that we don't know. We needed to do investigations. I think that's where investigative journalism comes in, because at a time when the government is trying to suppress access to information, then investigative journalism should take over, because we may report that maybe over 100 people have been killed, hundreds have disappeared, or others have been injured. But the truth of the matter is we need to get the real figures. We need to tell the story. So now as journalists, we might be busy in the next coming few days doing investigation on what really transpired when the government has shut down the internet.
Do you think that the reasons that people have gone to the streets to demonstrate has been told, and that what the forces for change want has been told adequately?
Can you come again, please?
I'm just saying, do you think that the reasons for these demonstrations has been adequately communicated by the media?
Yes, what we are seeing now, Peter, we are seeing people having access to information through the independent media, through online media. And when you understand that the role of the media is to make sure that people are informed so that they can make informed decisions regarding issues that impact their lives. So when we report, we've been reporting that government has been looting public funds, the government has been struggling to fulfill social obligations. And people now, they understand that the reason they are poor is because the government is suppressing their lives. The government is looting public resources. So these protests are influenced by the role of the media in telling the stories as it is. And we believe we have done a good job, because at the end of the day, people must take a decision how they want their country to be governed. If people are in the dark without information, they will always believe that maybe everything is okay, when in fact their lives are being suppressed by the government, they are living in poverty. And then the role of the media is to then tell them what is happening in the corridors of power so that they can take decisions. If they don't want the government, they will take that decision based on the information that is being provided by the media.
Zweli, Martin, Dlamini, we're going to have to leave it there, unfortunately, but thank you very much indeed for giving us your thoughts and your insights on the state of media and media coverage in Eswatini. Thanks so much indeed. All right, that's Zweli Martin Dlamini, who's himself an editor, but has often had to leave the country because of being chased by the authorities in Eswatini. All right, now on to something completely different, and we're now joined by MacGyver Mac-G Mukwebo, who's a South African podcast host of Podcast and Chill with Mac-G, which was founded in 2018. Mac-G is no stranger to the entertainment industry, having begun his broadcasting career as a child, anchoring a program called Crazy. Later moving on to YFM and 94.7 on radio. Since then, he's founded his podcast and Chill. Mac-G has interviewed over 100 personalities in the South African music and entertainment space. And in early June, he celebrated gaining a following of over 200,000 subscribers. He joins me now on the program. A very good morning to you, Mac-G. So how come I haven't been on your program? Am I not big enough?
Trust me, you are more than big enough. I remember growing up watching you, so it'd be an honor to have you on. But first thing you got to do is you got to be a chiller. Have you subscribed to the channel yet?
I'm a subscriber for sure.
Okay, good man, right. Good man.
So tell me about your journey into this, because most people know you as a music radio DJ, and you light up the dance floors, etc., etc. But also on radio as a DJ. We saw you as a kid on TV. This journey into podcasts, how did you make that jump?
It wasn't a conscious decision that I made. Like, I didn't wake up one day and say, hey, I'd love to get into podcasting. It's something that just happened, by God's grace, because I was working at Highfield Stereo, now known as 947. I'd worked there for 6 years, and then you know how it is in our industry. Yeah. They didn't renew my contract. So when they didn't renew my contract, I was like, okay, cool, what am I going to do? And it was in June, and the radio fiscal starts in April. So I'm like, what am I going to do from June until next year, April? And I was like, wow, that's like 8 months. And if I do nothing, you know how it is in our industry. If people don't hear about you or see you, they forget about you. So I'm like, you know what? Let me just start a podcast until next year, April. And then when April comes, I'll go knocking at radio stations and see who'd want to pick me up. So I started my podcast then at about June, July. And then by December, it just became a monster. And then I was like, you know what? Actually, maybe there might not be a need to go back to radio. And here we are.
So do you think that it's a sign of what's happening in terms of how people consume media, and that maybe the way that things have been set up traditionally, that's now for a certain age group or for a certain era?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, I think they both have a place to live together, like parallel. That's traditional media and digital media. However, having been on traditional media, I have witnessed that it's out of touch with what's happening in the ground right now, in terms of especially with the youth, because people are on their phones, you know. Yeah. I had been on radio for like over 10, 15 years, but just in 2 years of doing my podcast, the impact that it has is way more than all the years I was on radio combined, because it's such a powerful medium, and your audience is literally anyone who has access to Wi-Fi, data, has a phone. That is your audience, and that's pretty much most people around the world.
What are you allowed to do, or you allow yourself to do in a podcast that you can't do on mainstream media? I know that there's sometimes an 18 restriction on your on the top left-hand corner of your screen. So do you think that that's what it is? What is it?
No, I think more than anything, besides the age limit, it's just about freedom. You know, as a broadcaster, so many of these institutions try to restrain you and, you know, to tell you what to do. So if you're a broadcaster who's out of the box and likes to experiment and, you know, push boundaries and explore as a broadcaster what capabilities and how far you can take things, then the podcasting platform is best. You know, I mean, look at yourself. I'm sure there's people that you've interviewed who you've never wanted to interview, but because, you know, you've got a job to do, you got to interview them. Am I right or wrong?
I've loved every one of it. All right.
You understand what I'm saying? But on a podcast, literally, you have the freedom to do what you want, how you want to do it, whenever you want to do it. So the possibilities are endless, and that's what I thrive on, because my biggest dream and passion is just being behind the mic, whether it's on radio or whether it's podcasting. As long as I'm behind the mic, I'm at my best and I'm feeding my soul. So podcasting allows you to stretch your imagination and come up with things that normally you wouldn't do on traditional spaces.
And I suppose the thing about podcasting is that it's an expression of you in its fullest sense, whereas on traditional media, there's fluidity within a framework. There's a channel ID, and that you must almost always kind of follow through. Let's talk about, you're a businessman now, actually, because you own your podcast, because you are the one creating the content, you get paid directly as opposed to going via your employer. Does that make a world of difference?
Extremely. Because normally, you know, you'd go do your radio show, get your paycheck, and then you'd leave. But literally now I have to do everything, like the whole 360. You know, I was saying on my podcast the other day that, you know, some people are worried about contracts. I'm worried about which sponsor might pull up next, you know. So it's a different ball game, but it's amazing because we've come so far. Like, it's not even just about my channel anymore. We're building a network, you know, because I've got other podcasts under my umbrella. We've got a podcast with Bougie, which caters to the LGBTQI community, which is really great. I mean, there's nothing, before we started it, nothing like that had been done before. And then we've also got a female podcast, which is called On the Table, and that's also striving and it's doing really, really well. And then there's other platforms. I mean, there's other podcasts that we have in the platform. So we're growing as a network, and it's kind of strange because I never aspired to be a CEO or head of a network. You know, all I wanted to do was just be behind the camera. I mean, behind the mic. But, you know, as we grow and as the channel grows, you know, I've had to step into that field and become a businessman, like you said, and become a head of the network.
Mac G, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and it sounds so very exciting. I wish I was 30 years younger, because now I think I'm looking forward to sitting on a mountain and reading a book, listening to your podcast. Take care, my brother.
Thank you so much. That sounds great.
Okay. That's Mac G, effervescent podcaster, and you can catch him on his podcast, Mac G Podcast and Chill. And yeah, it's for a particular type of audience, and what it's showing is that media is been shifting and changing the way it's produced, the way it's consumed, and different audiences will receive it and get it in a certain way. So that's Mac G, and a very fascinating chat there, and also proof that, you know, sometimes out of one disappointment, new opportunities come through. He didn't get his contract renewed at 94.7, but guess what? He's got 200,000 followers now on a different platform, communicating in a different way. And perhaps he might not have gone through that journey. So maybe there's a life lesson for everybody there, that as one door shuts, there may possibly be many others opening. Okay, you're still watching Media Monitor, and what we like to do as we start to wrap up the show, of course, is take a look back at some of the newspaper headlines, and we've got Makudu Safara, who's the editor of Times Live and the deputy editor of Sunday Times. Makudu, great to talk to you as always, and I'm going to start actually with a conversation that I had earlier with two other gentlemen, and it's this Cyril Ramaphosa, Jacob Zuma media coverage. Mzwanele Manyi says that the media is not fair. It is characterizing President Zuma as someone who doesn't want to cooperate, doesn't want to go to the commission, and is generally not helpful. That's what he says, and he says that in contrast, President Ramaphosa doesn't get that kind of treatment and is basically treated with kid gloves. You're the media. What's your story?
Well, you know, I watched that interview. I was just amazed at the things that Mr. Manyi was saying, because it is not the media that created that scene where the former president did not return to the commission after lunch. It is not the media that facilitated that the chairperson of the commission, realizing that the person that was supposed to be appearing before him, answering questions and dealing with the commission's work, was not there, and so therefore had to address the nation about what the next steps are going to be. And in fact, the chairperson of the commission took a few days and then came back to provide a position about what he's going to do. And I've seen in the papers that Mr. Zuma is saying that he didn't leave because he didn't want to be at the commission, but that he left because there was a thing that he needed to attend to, and that he's sickly.
Yeah. All right, you know what? I'm going to jump in there, because essentially what you're saying is you're amazed by what Mzwanele had to say. What's on the front page of the Sunday Times today?
It's about the drama that's unfolding as a consequence of what I was just talking about. Yeah. In Nkandla, and in fact, part of what we publish and part of what I think City Press also publishes is the former president saying, you know, listen, I'm not going to hand myself to the prison authorities as directed by the Constitutional Court. And I suppose later on in the future, we're going to be accused of creating this thing when it is there. But it's a fascinating story about the court processes, the implications of the court processes, and the latest attempts Mr. Zuma is making to make sure that he eventually doesn't get to be jailed.
Makuru, we're going to have to leave it there, unfortunately. But thanks so much indeed. Always great seeing you. Always great chatting to you.
Thank you for having me.
All right, that's Makudu Safara, who's the editor of Times Live and deputy editor of Sunday Times. That's Media Monitor for today. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Next week, a new show, Media and Society, will be with you, and the anchor is Rams Mabote. So join in, tune in, tell your friends. There's a new series in town, and it should be pretty exciting. So that's from next Sunday at the same time, right here on this channel. From all of us on the Media Monitor team, it's been great. Take care. Bye-bye.